I grew up here.
Dans les vies, dans le vie.
This is a film very inspired by Ozploitation movies as much as American thrillers. If an audience member were to avoid trailers but still want to know what would be a good pairing for this movie, what would you suggest?
So weirdly, I kept on going in my own space and mind and whatever. The Gene Hackman movie, The Conversation, the Francis Ford Coppola movie. I don't know why, but I kept on thinking about that a lot. I don't know why, but because everybody was talking about the Oz exploitation kind of stuff, but I think there's a lot of American 1970s movies that were particular to that kind of stuff as well in their own right. So there's a bunch of them, but that one was my one that kept on coming to my mind.
Well, then I might have to do a double feature for that at some point.
I would do it, mate.
We talked earlier, you mentioned Ozploitation a little bit as being influence, and so I'd love, for audiences who maybe are going to skip the trailer because they want to go in blind, what are some film recommendations you would pair with The Surfer to get them in the mindset of where this is?
Good question. So I'd say The Swimmer. And that's obviously an American movie, but then from Australia, and also I'll give you another American one, Scorsese's After Hours. That was sort of an inspiration for his costume a little bit.
Okay.
And from Australia, Wake and Fried, Walkabout, Long Weekend, The Last Wave, even Picnic at Hanging Rock a little bit, the sort of dreamy atmosphere.
I mean, yeah, and you nail that dreamy atmosphere every time. I truly love it. And I'd love to know, I mean, you mentioned earlier working with Thomas, a couple of years prior on the pitch that he had for this. How much did you two collaborate to really ensure that atmosphere came through in the script just as much as it did through the camera lens?
Yeah, I mean, like the script, we kept on kind of tightening things, really, because we didn't want it to become repetitive. Mm-hmm. So, like, the escalation in the film has to sort of happen, and then it has to happen, more stuff has to be put on top of them, and more stuff, and more stuff, and more stuff. And if that wasn't happening, it wasn't really working as well, so that we kind of kept tightening up things. And then we found funny things as well to do within it, like the phone coming off, and that becoming then a weapon for later, and things like that. And then some stuff that Nick sort of brought to it, the Eat the Rat coming from, he had like a idea that came from Sabrina. There's a scene in Sabrina where a character pushes an olive into another guy's mouth and says, "Eat it." And so that kind of percolated in his mind and became this thing to do with a rat. So there's all that kind of stuff so first there was me and Tom collaborating on that and figuring out the kind of the vibe of it and everything. And then also when Nick got it, him figuring out the kind of pattern of the way he was going to speak and, his character's journey through it and how his voice was going to change throughout the film and all that kind of thing as well.
Well, it's an incredible journey to watch, both from a harrowing perspective, but from an entertainment perspective, so I can't wait for people to see it. My final question before I let you go to everyone else here, the beach is very much its own character. We talked a little bit off camera about finding it and working with some of the other surfers there. What was the biggest hurdle, maybe, that the beach presented when you were shooting on location?
Well, weather, because we were very exposed. We only had there's one scene, one scene really. Well, it's broken up. We had a day basically in a toilet.
Oh yes.
And that's the only time we were inside. So even when we were inside a car, you've got all these windows. So if it rains, that's not going to work. And so just the weather really, and maintaining the sense of the place getting hotter and hotter, but having no real control over the elements. Apart from just shooting in certain directions during the day. But the place itself, finding the location that would match the story and the staging of the story was tricky. We searched loads of beaches, Western Australia is gigantic. And eventually found this place, Yallingup, where the water had a certain quality of this kind of beautiful turquoise color that is very, has a feeling of nostalgia or something. And then also the sand was white, and the shrubbery and everything also had a kind of aggressive quality to it, and there was a lot of snakes and lizards and kangaroos and Australian wildlife around. So it sort of becomes part of the pressure cooker of the film, the environment's being punishing, and Nick's character almost becoming like a a wild bush animal or something.
So my first question for you, I actually spoke with Lorcan in our media suite earlier, and he mentioned how you had brought up the pitch to him a couple years before you properly brought the script.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know, across those couple of years, what was maybe the biggest change from your initial ideation of this film to what we see in the film now?
I think, well, the biggest change, there wasn't huge changes. The biggest change is Nicolas Cage being, his character's American, because when I came up with the idea, and I knew Lorcan was perfect for it, but my initial thinking on it was I wanted to make an Ozploitation film, something that was designed to be contained, single location, not feel like a single location because it's quite expansive, but I wanted to sort of box clever and make a movie that had a real route to production and that we could do on our own terms. But irony and life, this turned out to be a much bigger thing. But the script itself remained true, but the biggest change was, I had to change the character from being Australian to being American. So Nick and I had some conversations about it, but it was an easy fix actually, because in the original script, the character, he grew up in this place, but after an incident with his father, his mum took him away to Sydney. But in the reworking, I just made it, instead of taking him to Sydney, she took him to the US.
Yeah, it's a great little tweak, and it makes it all the more intriguing. And so, Lorcan's approach to directing, I always find, is a very dreamlike atmosphere. But I'd love to hear from the screenwriting side how much you tried to infuse that atmosphere into the script, in addition to Lorcan's own direction.
Well, one of the reasons I knew Lorcan was kind of perfect for it was that dreamlike aspect that he can bring to it, because one of the biggest influences on me and on the film was The Swimmer, which is a movie with Burt Lancaster, based on a John Cheever story. And that movie is one of my favorite short stories, but the movie has a very dreamlike quality about a man of a certain age who you think is together, but then he loses it gradually. So that was always there, and that was the thing that I spoke to Lorcan about first. My influences were The Swimmer, also J.G. Ballard's Concrete Island, Australian New Wave, Ozploitation, and I sort of knew Lorcan was one of the kind of geniuses that wouldn't get too frightened by that, and that it would be his bag. So it worked out pretty well.
I'd love to hear from you again. There's so many things people can take away from this, whether it's just a fun thriller, whether it's important reflection on toxic masculinity. What's the big thing you're looking forward to audiences taking away from this one?
The word toxic masculinity, that is something that I kind of wanted to engage with. Obviously, like Me Too and everything, the pendulum really swung, and that overcorrection was obviously justified. I myself had been through things as a young woman in production, but I also have 3 older brothers, and I think what attracted me to this material it's about men. It's not just about toxic men. You get scripts that are about bad women, fucked up women. It's not just toxic femininity. I wanted to show all the shades of masculinity and celebrate them. There's aspects of this movie that are a little bit homoerotic. That's because I wanted it to be that way. It's about all of the messiness of being a man and, celebrating them, but also making fun of them. So I think people should just enjoy it because it's a wild ride. I've said before, it's a coliseum. You want to see Nick get absolutely hazed, and I think that is a very good mirror on the reflection of society, that we want to see someone get absolutely screwed like that, but we also want them to be able to fight back and root for the underdog, and he sticks it to them, so that's what I want people to take away from it. Just have fun.
Before you can have everything, you have to experience nothing.
What?
Pathetic.